Welcome to today's explainer. Look, let's just be brutally honest for a second. Have you ever looked at a completely chaotic situation at your job, or maybe a deeply frustrating, ongoing issue in your own neighborhood, and just felt that heavy, sinking sensation in your chest? I know I have. You totally know the feeling I'm talking about. It's that sheer overwhelm of endless email chains that go absolutely nowhere, or community projects that stall out before they even get off the ground. It's the draining reality of just feeling like you're constantly spinning your wheels, and honestly, we all face these hurdles. Chaos is, well, it's just a part of the human experience. But here is the critical difference we need to talk about. What separates the people who stay stuck in that exhausting, endless cycle from the people who actually drive meaningful change is having a reliable framework. Research actually suggests that a massive percentage of our working hours are completely wasted simply because we tackle unstructured problems with unstructured reactions. Today, we are going to change that. We are going to transform those chaotic, anxiety-inducing daily challenges into structured successes. We're exploring a highly practical, incredibly effective methodology for problem solving, specifically designed to cut through the noise in both your workplace and your community. So let's dive right in.
Okay, here is our roadmap for today. First, we'll confront the reality of everyday problems. Second, we'll break down the core 6-step framework. Third, we'll apply it to a real-life scenario at a local store. Fourth, we'll dive into implementation and teamwork. And finally, we'll cover reviewing the final outcome.
Section 1, the reality of everyday problems. Let's get into it.
I really want you to picture this scenario because honestly, most of us have lived through some version of it. You're part of a local group and you're assigned to finish a weekend community cleanup task. You actually gave up your Saturday morning sleeping in for this. You blocked out the time, you show up in your old clothes, you are totally ready to work. But suddenly, the plans completely fall apart. Half the members you were counting on arrive an hour late. And the cleaning materials the organizers promised, they're incomplete. There are garbage bags but literally no gloves. Think about that awkward silence that settles over the group in that exact moment. You can practically feel the frustration mounting. So what happens next? Well, without a structured way to handle this breakdown, human nature just kind of takes over. Tempers flare up, the blame game starts immediately, people begin muttering under their breath, they start packing up their cars, and the cleanup simply doesn't happen. That weekend morning wasn't just wasted time, the community's trust in the whole project was genuinely damaged.
Now, that failed community cleanup is just one localized, specific example, but it connects to a much broader ecosystem of stressful situations. Every single day, we are being squeezed by large-scale, macroeconomic pressures, things like unemployment or the rising prices of goods due to inflation. And at the exact same time, we are dealing with immediate, micro-level frustrations. Maybe it's a global supply chain issue causing a lack of materials at work. Maybe it's team misunderstandings, unsafe workplace practices, or, just a bitter neighborhood dispute over poor waste disposal and whose turn it is to take out the recycling. The stakes are undeniably high. Navigating life without a structured plan for these issues leaves us feeling totally powerless, like we're just victims of circumstance. But listen, we are not powerless. Actually, scratch that. We are incredibly capable. Because while we might not be able to single-handedly fix global inflation, I definitely can't, we absolutely can control our structured response to how it affects our local business, our workplace, or our home.
That brings us right to Section 2, the 6 problem-solving steps. This is our toolkit.
The absolute crucial point to understand here is how logically each phase perfectly builds upon the last. It acts as a guardrail against our own worst instincts. You see, as human beings, we have this massive cognitive bias that makes us naturally love jumping straight from step 1 to step 5. We see a fire, we immediately want to put it out. But let's look at why the specific order matters so much. Step 1 is to strictly identify the problem. You literally cannot fix what you haven't clearly defined, and very often we end up mistaking a symptom for the actual underlying disease. Step 2 is gathering information. Skipping this step is exactly why we often end up throwing water on a grease fire. We act before we know what we're actually dealing with. So what are the cold, hard facts surrounding your issue? Once you have those facts, step 3 is where you get to be creative. Generate possible solutions. You want to brainstorm without judgment here. Just get every idea out on the table. Then, in step 4, you put your critical thinking hat back on to evaluate those options. Which one is actually realistic given your budget and your time constraints? Step 5 is taking action, implementing the chosen solution. And finally, step 6, the step almost everyone forgets, monitor and review the result. Did it actually work? This methodical step-by-step flow ensures we aren't just reacting emotionally to a crisis, but we're responding strategically to a challenge.
Section 3, real-life scenario, the store. Let's ground this theory in reality.
So here is our inciting incident. A small sari-sari store, which, if you're not familiar, is basically a neighborhood convenience shop, much like a corner bodega or a local general store, is losing customers. The owners have noticed a really sharp drop in foot traffic over the last few weeks. The word on the street is that customers are leaving because certain items are often unavailable when they come in to buy them. Now, we have to recognize the real stakes here. This isn't just a slight dip in some giant corporate spreadsheet. For a family running a local shop, this is the lifeblood of their neighborhood. They rely on this store to feed their own family. When foot traffic drops like this, it's a personal, highly anxiety-inducing livelihood crisis that needs fixing immediately.
Let's apply our framework directly to their crisis. We start with steps 1 and 2, identify and gather. The store owner has correctly identified the overarching problem, right? They are losing customers due to stockouts. But now comes the really critical gathering phase, and this is exactly where the danger of making assumptions comes into play. It is absolutely crucial for the store owner to pinpoint exactly which items are missing. They need to look at inventory logs or directly ask their customers, rather than blindly guessing why people are walking out. Think about it like a restaurant that suddenly loses customers, and the owners just assume it's because the decor is outdated. So they spend $50,000 on all new renovations, completely bankrupting themselves, when in reality, the chef was just serving cold soup. Yikes, right? If the sorry store owner panics and just assumes people hate the store's layout, they'll waste precious time and money reorganizing shelves, when literally all the loyal customer wanted was their favorite specific brand of soap.
And this brings us right into the extreme importance of steps 3 and 4, generating and evaluating options. The owner sits down and brainstorms 2 potential solutions. Option A, lowering all store prices across the board to try and attract people back. Or Option B, consistently stocking the specific missing items they identified during their data gathering phase back in step 2. Now, evaluating these options leads to a pretty obvious but totally necessary conclusion. Lowering prices across the board might temporarily get people in the door, sure, but unless you're planning to run a charity, it's a terrible long-term business model that will completely destroy their profit margins. Plus, it doesn't even actually solve the root cause, which is the specific missing items. Therefore, highly targeting the inventory is the most realistic, sustainable, and effective fix.
Which leads us to section 4, implementation and teamwork. We've got our plan, now let's execute. To execute successfully, you absolutely must translate your abstract thoughts into a concrete action plan. You clearly define the problem, losing customers. You list out the exact information needed, which items are missing. You define the best solution, stock those specific missing items. And finally, you establish the concrete, boots-on-the-ground action, purchase those items daily. Writing it out structurally like this is a game changer. It bridges that massive gap between theory and reality. It ensures that everyone involved, whether it's the store owners, the employees, or the volunteers at a community event, knows exactly what the overarching goal is and what specific daily action is required from them to actually achieve it. But hey, here is a critical point we simply cannot ignore. Executing any action plan successfully requires people, and people are wonderfully but frustratingly complex. Therefore, successful implementation requires real, foundational teamwork and communication skills. You need active listening to truly understand your team's concerns, and clear speaking to give directions without any ambiguity. You need strong cooperation. And let's be totally real here, we've all been in those group projects where cooperation just meant one person doing absolutely all the work while everyone else watched. Real cooperation means actually sharing the load. Finally, you need respectful peer feedback. What does that actually look like in practice? It means telling a coworker that an adjustment is needed without attacking their character. Because even the most brilliant, perfectly crafted action plan in the world will fall apart in minutes if the team implementing it cannot communicate with patience and respect.
Finally, section 5, reviewing the final outcome, the last piece of the puzzle.
So the crucial point is step 6, monitoring and reviewing. You've implemented your shiny new action plan, but how do you actually know if it was successful? Well, you have to measure it. For our sorry store owner, the metric for success is pretty straightforward. Are the customers coming back? Are daily sales increasing? If the answer is yes, fantastic. But if the answer is no, listen to me, this is vital, it is not a failure. You didn't fail, you just ran a scientific experiment and discovered one way that doesn't fix the problem. You now have more data. You take that new data, you return to step 1 completely without ego, and you evaluate what you might have missed.
I want to highlight this specific guideline directly from the source material. Show patience, responsibility, and cooperation when suggesting solutions to common problems. I absolutely love this because it adds real emotional intelligence to our structural framework. Real-world problem-solving is not a 20-minute sitcom episode where everything is perfectly wrapped up with a neat little bow before the commercial break. Real-world solutions take time to bear fruit. A framework is really only as good as the attitude of the person using it. These overarching personal attitudes are exactly what make this six-step process truly stick and succeed in the messy, complicated world we live in. Problems will always be frustrating, for sure, but approaching them with a steady, patient, and responsible mindset fundamentally changes the outcome.
Let's end with this. I really want you to think of one real problem you are facing right now. Whether it's a massive bottleneck at your workplace, a frustrating dynamic in your community, or just an overwhelming issue in your personal life. Take a moment, write it down. Now, using the framework we've just covered, what are the first 3 steps you can take today to start solving it? How will you identify the root cause, gather the actual facts, and generate creative solutions? Chaos is an inevitable part of life, but remaining chaotic? That is a choice. Don't let problems overwhelm you. Start breaking them down step by step. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I genuinely hope this practical framework empowers you to confidently tackle whatever challenges come your way today. See you next time.